Ace looking dapper as usual.
Hey, how you doing, man?
How you been, man?
Keep it well? Warm again?
Yeah. Waiting for the weather to break. Finally get some sunshine now.
Absolutely.
Welcome, everybody. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Wherever you are joining us from, it's a privilege and a pleasure to have you all with us. It's Wednesday, time for another Light 'em Up live, time for an inspiring and enlightening conversation with no other than the man, the myth, the legend, freshly shaved with a fresh haircut, looking no older than 40. Nick, it's such a privilege and pleasure to have you with us. I'm delighted to welcome you back to the Light 'em Up Lounge. We've had the privilege and pleasure of hosting you a few times as our guest of honor. You joined us on a regular basis as well. But the great news is there's exciting new projects in the pipeline. There's plenty of stuff to talk about. Of course, I'm well equipped over here with the iconic, legendary, and truly magnificent Around the World in 80 Cigars, The Travels of an Epicure. And that's the way we see it here at Light 'em Up as well. Travels of epicures and friends and family coming together to discuss the finer things in life, enjoy wonderful cigars together, whilst having an epicurean chat. So, Nick, without further ado, welcome. Good to see you, my friend, and thank you so much for taking the time.
Reinhard, thank you for that incredible warm-up. You're going to have to go on before me wherever we go, my friend. That's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, no, a special effort. I went and got a haircut today, and I had a shave about an hour ago. I put on a brand new shirt. You can't smell it, but I've even got aftershave on, Reinhard.
Unbelievable. I'm actually curious. How much do you think aftershave interferes with the cigar experience? Because
that's a good question.
Different ways of carrying your cologne and a bit of aftershave. That
is a good. In all seriousness, that is a good question. And I don't tend to wear a lot of it, or I don't tend to wear it very often. And when I do, I wear it very sparingly, and it tends to be quite a light, elegant aroma that dissipates fairly quickly. So I think, you're right. If you slap on something, very musky, very heavy that sits around a long time, I particularly personally find those sort of things off-putting. And maybe it's because it interferes with your cigar. It could be, but I prefer something very light and very easy, so that you feel great when you put it on, but a few hours down the line, you're back to smelling like you always do.
Now, I know we're going way off topic right from the get-go, but
this is what I love.
We're talking about Epicurean lifestyle and the finer things in life. What perfume does Nick Hammond wear?
That's a good question. So, we're getting really deep now. I wash with Florist Soaps, which is an old English company. They make beautiful, delicate, really nicely scented soaps. And so I get some of those either every Christmas or my birthday, and that tends to last me all year. And I shave generally with a straight razor. Mm-hmm. So I brush up and shave with the cutthroat, and then I have some stuff that, funnily enough, I got into tobacco years ago. You wouldn't believe it. At Dortmund, I bumped into a chap whose name I will think of. And he said, "You've got to try this stuff." And it is named after. Now, I'm not much of a motor racing fan. Are you a motor racing fan?
Well, not really. I find too little time for those kind of things, right?
Well, it's named after Graham Hill, who was Damon Hill's father.
Right.
And this guy, and he was a very dapper, very cultured, very elegant Englishman. and he dressed beautifully. He was always immaculately turned out. And they got permission to use his name for these range of products, and they were superb. So I got a load of stuff, and I've still used this little bit of aftershave, which is lovely. But failing that, I do tend to stick with the florist stuff. I've got some either that or True Fit and Hill on St James's. They sell some really lovely. I've got sort of a Spanish leathery one I use occasionally. So yeah, good conversation start.
Very, very true. Nick,
Polo in the green bottle, Mike's saying, yeah, that was great as well.
Good one. Nick, that's what I love so much about having a conversation in the cigar with you. That's what I love about your work, about your writing. You, in my humble opinion, are the epitome of a British gentleman, very eloquent, well-spoken, well-versed in the finer things in life and everything that make for, to use that word again, epicurean lifestyle. But it's always inspiring because you don't get stuck with one topic. There's certain people in life, you have a conversation with them, and after 5 minutes, you feel like you pretty much talked about everything that there will ever be to talk about. And then there's people like yourself where time just flies, and you've touched on pretty much every single topic you could possibly imagine, and way beyond that. And that's what I also found around the world in 80 Cigars. It's wonderful stories that only life can tell, and only cigar enthusiasts can live through and experience, I feel. How did you initially discover this world, and when was that moment where you found the inspiration and the enjoyment of sharing those moments and sharing those conversations, but then at the same time not just savoring them for your own pleasure and enjoying them leisurely, but to share that with the world and to translate that into written form for other peoples to participate in that? That's a whole different animal. How come?
Yeah, there's several good points. I mean, it's kind of you to say that, I epitomise that sort of thing. I very much feel that I don't, because I didn't come from a particularly wealthy, affluent background. I didn't go to a particularly posh school. I never have had tons of money to buy bespoke suits with and that sort of thing. So whilst I appreciated the art and the culture behind those things, I was a little bit jaundiced towards, perhaps unfairly, some of the people that perhaps did them, who maybe were a bit more upper class. It was also effortless to them. And whilst I appreciated the stuff that they had and used, I particularly didn't feel that I was part of that world. So part of the reason for me pursuing those angles and going down those roads and finding things out that I was curious about was because I wanted to do it in my way that I was comfortable with, without having to pretend that I was something that I simply wasn't. And I think what is one of the good things about getting old or older is that you feel more comfortable in your skin, and you learn to believe that actually, I can do things if I want to do them, and it doesn't really matter where I come from or what I've done. When you're young, you're told that, but you have to live through that to do it. And that was one of the things I did do, was teach myself to go to these places. And I remember going into JJ Fox's, for example, many, many years ago, and just standing outside it and looking at it and looking in and walking past and looking in. And I was intimidated because, that was a world that I didn't know. I didn't come from that world, and I thought I would look foolish and I wouldn't know, what to say, and I didn't want to make a fool of myself. But, I got to the stage where I thought, do you know what, let's sod it. I love cigars, I always have, and I want to find out about them. So I open the door, and in I go to that wonderful old store that I know you've been in, and probably many of you guys have been in. That beautiful old wood oak panelling, and, some of the staff look like they've been there for 200 years, let alone the shop. But, and it is just a wonderful place, but quite intimidating for a young person who doesn't know what they're doing. And And they have to play a very fine game, those guys, because you don't want to be condescending to an expert who walks in, who knows what he wants and he knows what he's talking about. You don't want to treat him like a newbie. Similarly, I think it's very important that they don't treat newbies like, like idiots as well. So I taught myself to go to these places and to go to these gatherings, and I ended up, maybe I'd interviewed Lord so-and-so, or I've interviewed everyone from the Prime Minister down over the years, and so I learnt to, what they say, fake it till you make it, I guess. And so I became comfortable in that world in a way that I wouldn't have been unless I was very inquisitive and curious, and that is, I think, my sort of driving force is my curiosity. If I'm interested in something, if it intrigues me, then I will pursue it. And the only way I've ever found myself able to express myself in the way that I want to is through my writing. I've never been that good at anything else to such a degree where I feel it is an expression of me, but my writing is very, very much that. And people have told me over the years that it just, we feel like we're there with you. That when I grew up, I was, I don't know if you guys knew, but I started as a newspaper reporter. And so I covered everything from murder trials to leisure, to sport, to cinema, to anything you can think of. So it gives you a really good, broad base of knowledge. I like to say that I know a little about a lot. And that's not a bad place to be honest. Because, it's very easy to have a conversation, because I almost invariably end up saying, well, it's funny you should say that. I once went and wrote about sea salt in Essex, or anything crazy you can think of. So I know little bits about, so I'm quite a good, useful person in a general knowledge quiz. But people used to say to me when I got the chance to write long form features in magazines and things, really, I could hear your voice. It really felt like I was there with you. And that was always a great reward for me to hear that, because that's really what you aim for, I think, as a writer, is to let people inside your head. Yeah. And I discovered that I did have a talent for that. So that's really my way of finding something that I think is amazing. And you know what it's like when you go somewhere incredible, or you have an incredible meal, or you see something you can't believe. The first thing you do is look around, and hopefully your partner or your friend is there with you. But sometimes when you're on your own, you look around, there's no one there, and then you think, I wish I could share that with someone. And I always feel that, obviously, with my family, but I also feel now that I feel I can share that with people, because I immediately start thinking, how would you write this? And it's interesting. I try not to write while I'm away, because I find it's too distracting, and I don't get the best of it. I go away, I travel, I do things, I make notes, and I might take some audio, and I do shorthand, but then I come away and let it percolate, and I like to let it just sit in the back of my mind. But sometimes what I do think of is, like, I think of a really good intro, or something I've spotted that no one else has spotted, that I will pin in my mind and go, right, remember that when you come to write it, that thing was happening over there. And it gives you a hook to sort of, and I think that's why people feel, my God, his level of observation is very, very keen. Because I think if you are a good listener and a good writer, a good reporter, you should be more observational than everybody else, And I've always been the sort of person that does watch, and everyone else is walking around and doing stuff, and I'm watching them. That is sort of kind of thing that I do. Yeah. Sorry, that was very long-winded.
It was brilliant and wonderful to hear, because first of all, Nick, I love and very much appreciate the fact that you shared some of your personal background, and how you probably in the very beginning sometimes felt awkward when walking into those high upscale places, and still to this day, in particular in Europe and in probably the Middle East, or more in the Eastern Hemisphere, I feel the enjoyment of handmade premium cigars has a bit of that elitist connotation to it, which to a certain extent is appreciated and relevant and important because it keeps that culture alive and it gives a certain elegance and finesse to the whole art and craft of cigars, where on the other hand it can also be a bit exclusive in the original sense of the word,
Yeah.
where certain people feel like they probably don't belong or don't have a chance to enter that. And interestingly enough, I've made the exact same experiences coming from a rather humble and poor family upbringing myself. And I worked in hospitality pretty much with the same idea to not necessarily fake it till I make it, but to be at important events and to meet people and have meaningful conversations. And I had the privilege of serving, pretty much everybody from His Holiness the Pope to royals and
Amazing.
famous singers, pop stars, and it was always magnificent. And ultimately, what I've come to realize in life is that true luxury, the way that I understand and feel it, and the way I want to live and share and portray it, is not in the money you spend or the financial weight of something. It's in the ability to appreciate and savor the moment and that particular thing, whatever it might be, and to truly be fully immersed in that pleasure and in that hedonistic experience of something wonderful. And then you have that immediate connection with, for example, with cigars. I feel you're instantly connected with all the people who gave, as we call it, the blood, sweat, and tears in the manufacturing, even before that in the growing of the tobacco, those 200, 300 hands that touch one single cigar before you get the pleasure of lighting it up. And you're connected with all those people. And that is true luxury, I feel. And so Brian just said in the comment, it's mindfulness. Yes, absolutely.
Totally it is. And
to have the ability to share that, as you said, in such an eloquent and wonderful way is truly magnificent.
Well, that's such a good point. And you're absolutely right, Brian. It's taking a moment to actually live. We exist most of the time. We get through the day, we survive, we do what we have to do. But, it's so important to try and remember that we're here for a short time and that we need these moments of actually living, stopping and physically feeling how you're feeling and taste something. That very act of tasting something is mindfulness, isn't it? Because it makes you think about the very moment. You're not thinking about your bank balance or the dog needs to go to the vet or whatever it might be. You're thinking, what does this taste like? That's mindfulness in a microsecond. And that applies to cigars. And one of the things you said about the sort of snobbier aspects of cigar smoking, I think it's great that they're there because, as you say, well, not the snobby aspects are there, the great that the high class aspects are there, shall we say.
Yeah.
But I fancy that I sort of wanted to get into it because I wanted to be able to encourage other people who were like me, who just liked cigars. End of. And, you guys know, you walk into any cigar store, or most cigar stores in the world are just average Joes enjoying cigars, right? They're not guys in fancy suits. They are just people who like a smoke. And I was on my travels recently, and I was in Houston. And I landed at the airport, and like everybody, I'm sure, the first thing I did was, where's the nearest cigar bar? and then, of course, because America's so huge, I sort of look at it and go, oh, that's great, I'll go to that one. And it's about an hour and a half away. But I eventually found one that I could reach. And it was just a bunch of guys sitting around smoking cigars. And I thought, perfect. There was a liquor store next door. Yeah, go and get your beer. You can bring it in. And as I walked in, the guy said, hey, man, enjoy your stick. And I just thought, I'm home. And that is the average cigar customer. We always have to remember that. But it doesn't mean that we don't love nice things. We're drawn to aesthetic things. I agree with you entirely about the cost of things. But, nice things are great. And I like to be around nice things. I think it's very important that we don't fall into the trap that perhaps some of the wine people do. And it becomes, almost impenetrable to anybody who doesn't want to, give up 80% of their life for the next 5 years to try and learn all this shit. That really puts me off. I'm not a scholar. I wasn't enamoured with school. The way that the school worked back then, maybe it's different now, didn't appeal to me. It couldn't really get to me, so I couldn't wait to get out of school. So if you tell me that I've got to learn this, and there's lots of intricate things, and my mind has gone. But if you say to me, look, this family has started this business, and this is the old man, and he's still here. He's been doing it for 60 years, and he's sitting in his rocking chair. Why don't you go and talk to him? That to me is like the rabbit hole. Yeah. And then I can go and talk to them, and that is so much more interesting to me than brands and histories and, you know, the stuffy side. I think that, you know, I'm not knocking it because some people love that stuff. For me personally, that is deadly, deadly boring. I just love cigars and cigar people.
Nick, again, I can so much relate to what you're saying, because for me, it was the experience at the WSET, the Wine and Spirit Education Trust,
Right.
that led me down that rabbit hole, because I experienced there for the first time, even though I loved learning and I loved school, just because I love to get more information and discover new things.
Sure.
It was at the WSET that I learned about history, geography, climate, soil, about people and cultures through something that you can smell and taste and perceive with your senses. And the very same is true for cigars. And I would wish, in particular for the cigar industry, that there would be more platforms and pieces of content where you can dig deep, where you can, at your own pace and leisure, discover as much or as little information as you wish and as you please. But just last week we spoke about this with Pete Johnson briefly, where we said, well, comparatively, the cigar industry has less information, education available than the wine industry, for example. And yes, we're probably a couple of years behind that. It's a much smaller industry and a smaller niche entirely, but it's things like this, your work, your writing, I feel that is so critically important, because it serves as one of those pillars to provide both information and education, and entertainment in one very wonderful, eloquent format. Why do you think there's not that much in terms of educational pieces in the cigar industry? And then secondly, though, do you feel there's a bit of a renaissance or a bit of an uptick and uptrend when it comes to those pillars and different platforms, with things like Hand-Rolled, again, to Pete Johnson's credit? Now they're working on a second edition. There's more books. Just recently, Aseline and the Fuente book from Alan Sigmund came along. You're writing a sequel to Around the World in 80 Cigars. So is there more of that, or is it just a humble wish gone wild, where we're probably hoping for more of it to be, so we just see it everywhere?
That's a really good question. I think the answer is a bit of all of the above. I think the reason that there isn't more of it, quite frankly, Reinhold, there isn't enough money in it. There's a lot more money in wine and whiskey and other things. People go, do you know what? I love that, but this makes more money. I'm one of the idiots who goes, I love that, so I'm going to do it and try and find a way to make it work. I also think it is better. I think our problem, if we have such a thing as a problem in such a wonderful hobby, is that we attract a lot of people who love to blog or video stuff that makes them look good in fancy places. I don't think there's many people who really want to educate people. It's very easy, and I don't mean this to sound like I'm perfect and everyone else is rubbish, because I don't mean that at all. But from my perspective, I think there's a lot of narcissism in the way that the world operates these days, let alone the cigar market. If you look on Instagram, sometimes I put a video up because I know I have to do that. I don't like doing videos. I don't like pictures of myself, because I don't feel that's the point of my writing is about the cigars and the people. I'm not the story. Do you know? I was always taught that. It was, you know, my news editor used to say to me, "Don't make yourself the story. You've got to be the person that understands the story so you can put it across." But I do understand that now times have changed. You know, I have to promote myself to a certain extent. So I'll put a video up, but it's always me sitting here. And if it's in the middle of winter, I've got a scarf on, and you know, this is how it is. What, you know, I personally dislike the amazingly choreographed stuff that has 100,000, you know, viewers or whatever, but it means nothing, and I don't think it educates, and I personally don't find it entertaining. So I think there is room for it, and I think it can change. I just think we need to look at cigars in a different way, because one of the things I all wrestled with before I went ahead and, you know, produced the book was, why on earth would anyone produce another cigar book? And so many people said that to me. You know, the book would have been out 5 years earlier if I'd have had the bottle to do it, or if I hadn't listened to people who said, "You're mad, there's millions of cigar books." And that's the God's honest truth. So, I mean, one really well-known cigar person, who I won't name, but who just laughed when I said I was going to write a cigar book, and he said, "Yeah," you know, and just sort of laughed, as if to say, "Why? You know, that's just ridiculous." So I really thought, well, maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree, you know. And then I thought, I really want to do this. And if I do it, you've got to make it a worthwhile project. How do you do that in a way that someone can't then turn around and go, it's a lovely book, Nick, but I've read it 6 times before by other authors. And the one thing you can say about my book is there is no other book like it. And I'm very proud of that, because at first I thought, what if I do sort of the story of some of the crazy things I've got up to? And then I went through that period of, why would anyone be interested in my story? You know, you're not an international superstar, you're not famous, you're not good at music, you're not an explorer, you haven't broken any records. And I think, you know, I was very hard on myself. And then actually when I talk to people, and everywhere I'd go, as I said earlier, someone would say something and I'd say, "Funny you should say that. I interviewed the owner of that company once when I was in," or whatever it might be. And I thought, yeah, I do know a hell of a lot about a little. Why don't you use that inquisitiveness and that endless journey that you're on to describe the way that cigars, the way that you love cigars? And that to me is my love. You know, nothing in my life, I was thinking about this the other day, I don't think there's anything else in my life other than the obvious children and getting married that has brought me so much continued joy and exploration and excitement, and it never ever fails. You know, I was with the guys in Bovida up in northern Minnesota for the next book, and I was like a kid in a sweet shop, because we were, you know, they brought these cigars out, we were messing about, they took me down to the geeks room where they mess about with humidity levels and stuff, and Rob Gagne turned around and got a box of cigars, and he opened the box up, he says, "Let's have a cigar." And I just looked at him, and this smell came up, and I said to him, "Isn't it just fucking great?" I said, "It never changes. It's always makes me as excited as it did that first time when I walked into JJ Fox or wherever it might have been, and that old smell." And that's what I think most people feel who really love cigars. You know, it's not about all the paraphernalia. It's about that quickening of the heart, that when you smell a humidor or a cigar lounge, you're looking around to see where it is, you know. And that really floats my boat. So I think there's more to do. I think there is definitely something that could be done on education. Maybe me and you should do it. The problem is the finance side. That's the rude truth of it. You know, if all the backers could come together and realise that, you know, they can't advertise in most of the world's markets, so they should be spending their marketing money where they can spend it to get their message across. And the way that they can legitimately do that is through press and press comment. But I think, you know, it's very hard to get blood out of a stone sometimes. Mm-hmm. That's been my experience. And that's why I've had to take it in a different direction and try and find another route to get that through in my own way, really.
let's talk about that for a second, because in essence, I know a lot of people are curious. Everybody watching this should get involved and support your crowdfunding campaign to get the sequel to Around the World in 80 Cigars off the ground and flying. Briefly before that, speaking on the media component and the budgetary restrictions you mentioned when it comes to successfully sharing educational, informational content about cigars with the world, and that it's so hard to make a living based on this.
Yeah.
How has the arrival and evolution of social media changed that whole landscape? And would you say for the better or worse, or has it taken away quite a lot of that substance and also well spent marketing budget from other areas where it could probably serve a, either a wider audience or probably give a bit of a better informational insight into certain topics other than just a simple Instagram post?
Yeah, I think, I don't want to sound like everything was better in my day sort of old codger, but everything was better. No. I'm a big fan of writing and books and long form, obviously, for obvious reasons. I do think that ultimately wisdom is held between those pages, and whilst I think the internet and the Instagrams and the Facebooks and stuff are fantastic tools, I don't think anyone gets much wisdom from them, personally. I don't think you can learn whilst you're looking at a screen. I don't think you can learn as well, let's put it that way, as you do when you absorb something through just having it in your mind and building the picture in your mind. So I think it serves a great purpose. And and the reason it's taken off, because it's a marketer's dream. You can sell anything with a picture, and it's very sexy, and they can you get professionals to do it. It looks amazing. You put music on it, and next thing you know, you're starring in your own pop video. That's what you're doing. Now, of course, we all grew up with that stuff, and it looks great, but it's superficial. The music's the important thing. Pop videos are great, but is the music any good? And that's what concerns me, that, there's no substance to it. And if we want to progress and do things differently and find new ways of writing and interesting ways of writing, we have to look to be different. And I think, one of the things cigar industry is not very good at is doing things differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
Let me rephrase or reframe it probably.
Yeah.
Based on what you just said, do you see a slight shift in how brand owners, manufacturers, cigar companies think and operate? Because nobody really knows how long social media will be around for cigars, and how long people can continue posting their videos and stuff on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram. So could it be that eventually the industry at some point says, well, let's put some substance behind this whole stuff again? And you wrote Cinco Decadas. Again, Aslin Fuente just launched this incredible new book. You're working on a sequel. Do you see more in that direction? Because at some point, people will want substance.
Yeah, definitely. Although I see a distinction between, for example, Asaline and what I'm doing. Again, I think that is aimed at the very expensive, very glossy, beautifully produced, packaged, really nice book, but it's not aimed at people like me who want to learn about cigars. It's to put on your coffee table or in your lounge, and it's a beautiful thing. I think people will realise. What I find frustrating is, a big brand will pay, I don't know, off the top of my head, let's say for the sake of argument, they will pay $50,000 to put an advert in a magazine for 1 month. I could write most of a book for $50,000. and it lasts for years. And you get so much more in there, and it's read, over and over and over again, and it has a shelf life of however much you like, not just 1 month. That's the frustration I find. But, I can see it from someone's perspective that, yeah, but we know this magazine goes out to XYZ people. We know people read it. We advertise before it's expensive, but we get X result. And I go to them and, they say how many people will buy it. And how can you answer that? You can say my last book, well, I sold this. It's a different game entirely. And it seems that, the game today is about numbers and clicks and likes. And whilst there obviously is some intrinsic value in those, they do mean something, but I don't think they mean everything.
Mhm.
And, similarly, a #1 best-selling book might not be the best book in the world, but it's just been marketed very well. So, in answer to your question, I think yes. I think they're coming round to it, but I think they'll have to, because legislation is only going to get worse and worse and worse, and there won't be that many avenues that people will be able to use before too long, in my opinion.
Fair enough. Lawrence, it's a pleasure and privilege to have you with us.
My old friend.
Yeah, the question, I wanted to pose a question really to everybody. In the UK, we can't advertise. In the UK, we can't, I got thrown off of YouTube because I said I had those cigars in stock. We've since come back on, and we with YouTube's different. You talk about there being no money, Nick, in terms of the brands and also in terms of the retailers, all right? But the problem is that they can't really reach a medium, because you can't get an article in a paper about cigars.
True.
Right? You can't, even if you were happy to do an advertorial, and the mention of tobacco and everybody runs a mile.
Yeah.
So it's really the industry that we're in is such a strange beast, because we're really driven by the fact that cigars are lumped in with cigarettes.
Yeah.
All right. And therefore, although we're at a luxury end, which is, and everyone who's a lover of the leaf doesn't believe is anything like as bad as cigarettes, but we're lumped in that, and that's why there is a lack of funds or availability. All right, we can't find them. The amount of charities that come to me and say, we're doing a dinner, we'd like you to put an advert in our magazine, and I said, well, I can't.
No.
It's restricted, it's not allowed. Do you think that is the problem, the restrictions towards being able to voice anything outside of our specific publications?
Yeah, it's a good point to clarify, and it obviously makes life very difficult for people. My point is that you can work through journalistic comment if you work with people and magazines. There's nothing to stop me writing a story about your cigar store, as long as it's not, me selling your cigars or you selling your cigars. It's a fair comment in terms in legal terms, that I can go along and talk about whatever I like as a member of the free press. That's where the angle lies, and I think that's what people find hard to understand, because they're told they can't advertise, so they say we can't do anything. But if I want to write a book about cigars, I'm perfectly entitled to do so, and I can include in that whatever I like, and that's what I've done.
But yes, in the books that you've written, and I'm an avid follower and supporter of all of that. That's one side, but the question that was posed earlier, by Reinhardt and answered by you, is why is there not enough content out there? And the problem is getting that content out there is, A, there's not that many publications in which to get that content out, because a lot of them just won't touch it. It's information that is not just a journalistic story.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, and that's my point.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. You can't publish stuff and send it out to people. You've got to be very careful about what you can publish as a cigar retailer. I do understand that, and that is a massive issue. But that's all the more reason why people should support Cigar Journal and those guys that do that. And I just think also we need to keep trying to not reinvent the wheel, but think of new ways of writing stories and interesting ways of talking about cigars, because it can become very dull. People review a cigar and they taste this and they taste that and they taste the other. Well, once you've read 50,000 of those, where else do you go? That soon becomes very boring for me anyway. I want more than that, and I think most people do as well. So I think it's about trying to think of new and novel ways of introducing people to cigars in a way that, it doesn't jeopardize anyone's careers or anyone's businesses, but talks about it in a sensible adult way. That, so, I know that you've had the same feeling about cigars when you were young, and you still do now. It's the thing that binds us all. That it's more than the sum of its parts. If you see what I mean, it isn't just a cigar. It's something a lot more than that, and that is the angle I think the people are interested in. The makers, their histories, their real life stories, not just sort of glossy images of them, but their real life stories. I think that's and we've discussed this, Lawrence. There is room for a really universal, comprehensive, for want of a better description, training manual that tells you everything there is to know, about cigars, should you wish to dive that deep. Well, you're muted. You're muted, Lol. There you go.
The problem is social media is giving us a lot more.
Yeah.
It can't be as scrupulously looked into as a publication.
True.
So people just do it and they get away with it more often than not. So, and I think it, as you know how much I spend time-wise on social media, with YouTube, with the Instagram, and with everything else. It's my only outlet.
Yeah.
We write, but that again, we write our blogs. We write a blog every week, but it's difficult to get any content over.
Yeah.
Right. Without using social media. There's no and I've had, as you know, I've given our interviews to a lot of national newspapers, all right, and they put a line in. Carlo Ancelotti smoked a cigar, and so did Pep Guardiola.
Yeah.
And they come to you for comment on that, but that's all they're willing to say and do. They're not willing to go any deeper.
No, the one thing I have managed to not get away with, because it sounds like I'm doing something wrong, but to sneak under the radar, was my recent pieces, like for the Telegraph and the Times or whatever, in, what was the last one, in Portugal. So I flew out to Porto and wrote ostensibly about the English port family out there, and the Symingtons and their amazing houses of port. And I went round and had a wonderful few days there tasting port and drinking good food. But I also made sure that I talked about cigars in the piece, and I managed to sort of get it in that we went on these trips, we tasted all these wonderful ports, and I paired the port with this beautiful cigar that I'd picked up in London from so-and-so and so-and-so. And so in that regard, you can hopefully try and get some sensible coverage in every now and then. But as Lawrence says, they don't want to know unless somebody famous is pictured with having a cigar, and then they want a quick comment from you.
But the problem is you've had to sneak it in.
Yeah.
All right. There's no opportunity to actually write about it. You've written about something else and you've slipped it in, and that's the whole problem.
Yeah.
It's got to go under the radar and behind the,
Yeah.
It's a bit like when you were 18 at the school dance, you had to go and kiss the girl behind the kitchen door or whatever it was. It's sort of, a bit of subterfuge going on there, Mr. Nick.
Yeah, there is that element, and a lot of people, I've had my experience of pitching cigar stories, and people just run a mile when they see the word cigar. You're absolutely right in that regard.
Excellent comment, Lauren, and such an important point. Well, Nick, thankfully you found your way around this by now self-publishing the second edition of Around the World with Cigars. Tell us a little bit about how you've set this whole thing up, how you eventually came to structure the crowdfunding campaign, and of course also how people can support it and get involved.
Thank you, Reinhard. So that leads on nicely from that, really, because I wrote the first book. I did it as a labour of love, as my love letter to the industry. I didn't know how it would be received, but I thought this is my way of expressing what I think, this has brought to my life. And it's gone down very well, and people have genuinely loved it. And, I've had so many nice conversations and messages from people all over the world who've said, how it's helped them through lockdown, or expressed the way they feel about cigars, and so on and so forth. So I got a lot of satisfaction from that, but satisfaction doesn't pay the mortgage. And and I began to, I thought, well, rather than give up, I'm an obstinate devil, and I thought, well, how could you, now you've done this book, how could you do it in such a way that would make it commercially viable? We've sold 5,000 copies. It's in its third reprint. It continues to sell ever so well, but it was a sort of hybrid deal I did with a publisher. So they take 50% of the royalties. And whilst it's probably more or less wiped its face, you might say, Reinhard, it's a hell of a lot of work, and 30 years of learning and traveling and interviewing and growing has gone into that book. And it's a lot to do just to expect to get it paid for but not really earn anything out of it. So of course the question was, what would you bother doing? Everyone said, please do another, will you do another? We really enjoyed it. And I do enjoy, don't get me wrong, I don't just do it for the money. I think that's probably fairly obvious. But, I love it. It helps me express myself. But how can I do that in a way that then makes me think, actually, at least I can travel here and know that I'm earning some money while I'm doing it, rather than sort of trying to tell my wife that it'll be all fine, don't worry, I'm just disappearing for a week to Miami or something. We'll find the money somewhere. And so I thought, well, the first obvious way to do that is to self-publish, and by that I mean handle it myself. And by the time we got round to, after COVID, etc., I'd written several books, as you say. I've written books for other people, and I've produced the whole way of producing a book. I sort of overseen projects to get people's books printed, having written them. So I thought, well, you can do this now. You have the tools in place. I've got a wonderful team in Costa Rica who helped me put the books together in terms of design and sorting out the print specs and getting the mood boards and just getting everything sorted and the pagination, the layout, etc. I write the book, they put it together, we employ an illustrator, and we send it to, we get a good print quote and we send it to print. And I have to find a way to fund all of that. And then once that's done, the book goes out, and then at least if you sell a book in a shop and you pay £20 of it, some of that money will go to me. So, and that is obviously the whole point of the exercise. So my thought was, well, look, if I spend, I worked it out, and it wasn't in terms of my time for either traveling now or in the past. It wasn't the time for my little black contacts book of all the cigar companies and people that I've befriended over the years that, as is not something you can just get up one morning and go and do. And it wasn't my time for even writing the book. None of those things I factored in. What I did factor in was what I've just described to you, the illustration, the design, the production and the print. And it worked out about £30,000. So my option was, find £30,000 out of my own money and try and make that work. Or find another way. And I can't think who it was I was talking to. I think I might have been. Oh no, I know exactly who it was. It was the guys at Le Fin Lam, Pierre. And I suddenly just clicked, and I thought, yeah, of course. And so I cornered Pierre and said, look, would you mind having a chat to me about your experiences with crowdfunding? Because I know it worked well for you, got off the ground and got you off to a flying start, and you've never looked back. And he was wonderful, and sat down with me on several occasions and sort of walked me through the basics of it, because I'd never done anything like that before. And of course, there is a science to it. You know, there is a way of doing it that proves you have better results than if you just sort of try and slap it together. So I've had to learn all of that. I've got some friends on board helping me with that sort of technological side of it. And we've gone through a whole new learning curve. And so the idea was, yeah, let's go for it. Let's try and crowdfund that money. Because, you know, you've built this market of readers who enjoy and love your book and they want to see a second one. Let's try and give them a second one, but give them something a bit special so that they want to put some money into it as well. And it helps you get to a stage where you get to the day one and the books are in the shops and you're not already 30 grand in the red, you know. And so that's what we're going to do. The campaign launches on Friday, and it's for around the world in 80 cigars. There and Back Again is the new book. And it's going to be lots more of, not the same, they won't be the same stories, but very similar type stories, standalone chapters of all different adventures. Again, some of them over the years, some of them recently. I've been traveling a lot this year to fill up that adventure list. And I went on a crazy trip from Heathrow to Madrid, Madrid to Panama, Panama to Honduras, Honduras to Nicaragua. It took about 30 hours. And I lost my baggage, and my baggage never arrived. And I was in the country for 2 weeks. So it was a hot, sweaty, smelly mess, but it made for some fantastic, fantastic stories. And then similarly, more recently, I flew into Minnesota and had a crazy week with the Bovida guys, which I will give you a little teaser. I ended up in ER. And again, ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, but it makes for a superb chapter, let me tell you. We went winter camping. I slept out with no tent, and it was -15. I slept in a hammock strung between 2 trees. I'm getting too old for this, Ryan, I'll tell you. And then I flew straight from Minnesota, like minus something, into Houston. Went on my little trip that night to find the cigar store, and then I flew from Houston down to Miami. No, Nicaragua, straight back to Esteli. Spent some time with Nick Perdomo and his amazing factory and his amazing farms, and then I went back with him to Miami to get to spend more time with him. So there's so many good stories in there. There's whiskey tasting in Japan. There's getting caught in a hurricane in Mexico. You know, all the usual Hammond stupidity you would expect is going to be in there. And what I said I was going to do was for people who back the book, and of course there's several levels of backing that you put up, and it starts off with an exclusive crowdfunding edition of the book that won't be available in the shops. So you're not just buying the copy that everyone will be able to get in a little while. You're actually buying something that there'll only be 200 of, or whatever it might be. And it's got a different cover, and it's differently designed, etc., etc. And then it goes all the way up to, if you want to pay me the top tier, we'll both fly to Nicaragua together, and I'll take you around the factories and introduce you to the makers, and we'll have the trip of a lifetime, you know. So it's very, very exciting, very daunting, you know, and it's the same thing as doing anything, I suppose, that really, when you stick your neck out, it's like when you first write a book, you don't know if anyone apart from your mum's going to read it. Is anyone going to back it? Is anyone going to, you know, are we going to reach our target? How embarrassing would it be if you don't? Would it be the end of the world? Do you know what? You don't know unless you go for it. And, you know, we've built this wonderful readership, and 99% of people really love the book. And so I thought, let's go for it again and see if we can keep what I call cigar literature alive, because, you know, as we've discussed in a roundabout way, there's nothing quite like it, and there isn't that much stuff out there that both educates, as you very eloquently said, educates, entertains, and also just expresses that love of cigars that we all share.
Very true. Nick, I took the liberty of posting the link to the website, both
thank
here in the Zoom lounge, but also on all the Facebook links. So I truly hope that people can check it out and get involved and support this wonderful campaign to get the book off and flying from the get-go.
I'd be very grateful,
because I want to read all of these stories of you tramping around icy cold northern US all the way to Nicaragua and Honduras and everything in between.
Yeah.
Mace.
Sorry, let me just say, Sergio says he'd ordered, I think he means he ordered a book. He hasn't arrived yet. Do you mean the first book, Sergio? Because you should be able to get that. If you have a problem, just contact me and I can always ship you one if it's tricky. No problem.
Brilliant. That's sorted. Mace, you had a question. Good to see you, my man.
Great to see you. Great to see everybody. Nick, great to have a chat with you and see you on our usual Zoom hangout spot.
Thank you, mate.
It's it's really interesting. I think it's as you said, it's when COVID hit and it comes back to the industry that we're in, everybody kind of had to change, right? Everybody had to adapt to how they sold, how they engaged with customers or future customers. And I wonder, you did a lot of stuff with your podcast and the book and everything sort of timed around that. And we always talk about it. We need to educate people, about cigars. Cigars aren't cigarettes. It's different to, premium cigars and everything else. And I just wonder kind of like how you're working with Lawrence and the stuff that Lawrence is doing and how everyone's having to shift. Is it also maybe time to start talking about an education of the industry and the retailers and because there has to be a different way, right? We can't wait for another COVID to change up how we engage and try and get people involved. So I just wonder, is there a piece around that? Like from a journalistic perspective, is there something more that you and others writers could do to try and educate retailers and manufacturers about getting their brand out there? I know that, as Lawrence mentioned, the challenge is just getting into publications because of the laws and everything. But is there more that can be done around that? Moving away from the public and educating the public, but actually the retailers and the people who are involved in the industry itself.
That's a really good point. And yeah, I think, people who are working at the coal face, as it were, they're very, very busy. They know what works in their store. They don't want to try too much new stuff because, they haven't got the time and the effort to do that. But if it provably works, then of course they get behind it. And I think, that you see a lot of the stores now would perhaps do some of their own podcasts, or they get involved in live online events and things, which I think is great. And you're absolutely right. COVID, completely game changed everything, of course, for everyone, but particularly the cigar industry. And what I thought was very interesting and very telling is how, in many ways, and for many cigar retailers, it changed it for the better. Because you had this situation where the public, were at home, not being able to do what we wanted to do, or having more time to spend, and also being slightly concerned that the end of the world was nigh. So we thought, sod it, we'll smoke cigars, and that's what we did, and we did it big time. And cigar sales have just, flown through the roof. And I know for a fact, I spent a lot of time with a lot of the New World guys in recent months, and they just absolutely, their numbers have gone up 30% year on year. So I think it's a very interesting way to look at it. You can actually turn around and say, well, yes, this was a bad thing in many ways, but from the cigar industry perspective, it's really shown you how people want to buy their cigars. You're absolutely right, and I think there is something to be done around that. I think that's a really good point. You took a young cigar store owner or retailer or somebody who wanted to know, what can I do, rather than put a box on my shelf and then sit down and wait for someone to come in. Let's look at what happened during that. Lawrence will tell you himself that the shop was closed, that he could do click and collect, but he suddenly turned around and started sending out, boxes and boxes and boxes of New World cigars online. Now that, if you'd have said that to him 12 months before that, or 6 months before that, he wouldn't have believed you, because his entire focus and entire business was based around Cuba. But it is possible to change, and change fast. And I think if you can do that in this industry, you are a lot better than most, because it is a very, as I said before, a very traditional industry, and people are fairly set in their ways. So in answer to your question, I think it's an excellent idea, and that's something I will think about trying to do.
Great stuff. Thank you very much for that answer. And just a final question for me, and I know
Sure.
you're busy. You've got the book coming out. I'm looking forward to the launch event on Friday, see how we can all get involved. But I had a question about the podcast. Have you been doing any secret recordings in your travels? Are we expecting the Around the World in 80 Cigars podcast back anytime soon on Spotify?
Yeah. So many people say to me, "I love the podcast," and which is lovely and refreshing, and I enjoy doing it. But it can't, it takes me days and days and days and days, and it doesn't pay me anything. So what I have done, Mace, is I have done recordings about in my travels, and I put one up a month or so back. There's a little teaser about when I was in Africa.
Yeah, I got that.
Good. And yes, there will be some more. I just needed to go away and concentrate on something that was going to earn me some money. But now, hopefully, there is some sort of method to my madness, because you have a book called Around the World in 80 Cigars. So you also have a podcast, and then you begin to cross-sell. And we all get together like this, and Reinhard's kind enough to have me on, and we talk about it. And so the whole thing begins to sort of sell to each other. Hopefully we can reach a position where, there is enough people listening to the podcast that enables me to sell the book through the podcast effectively. And that, of course, is all the commercial aim. The altruistic aim is just to keep talking to you guys, because when I did the podcast, it was just, honestly, to keep me out of mischief. I was one of those guys sitting at home smoking and drinking too much, and thinking, shit, I can't just sit here all day and look at the wall, because I'm going to go batty. So what can I do that's going to give me some interest, and what can I offer that other people don't have? Again, that question. And it's going to be interesting. And I suddenly thought, I've got this contacts book, and not just cigar book. Over all the years I've gone around doing these weird things. Why don't I contact some of these really interesting people and talk to them about what they're doing, and how's COVID for them, and what their plans are, and how is their business? And so that was really how that came about. And it was just nice to be able to sit and catch up with people I hadn't seen for years when I had nothing else to do. And of course, I think a lot of you guys felt the same way. It killed an hour. You could sit down and listen to something that didn't involve the bloody news and everything that was going on. So yes, I will, Mace, I will keep going on the podcast just for you.
Good news, certainly.
Look forward to it. Look forward to it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, my friend.
Ryan, over to you.
Good afternoon. Good to see you, Nick. Seen you here several times on the other shows.
Hi, my friend.
Great to chat. I had a couple different questions or ideas and comments. One, going way back to the beginning, it really was interesting to me how you were talking about going into lounges, young and new and fresh and inexperienced, and it can be intimidating and snobby, I think was the word.
Yeah.
And so I've had similar experiences. I don't think that's just a UK thing. I think I experienced that here in the States too. And maybe it's a stereotype where in my mind, I was thinking everyone's very wealthy and maybe not very nice.
Yeah.
And interestingly, mostly I've had good experiences going in, especially when I was brand new, people being really helpful and asking me the right questions and finding something that was great for me. But there have been occasions too where I felt not welcome. Okay, so we're going to psychoanalyze me. So the question is, when I'm going in and I'm feeling unwelcomed, is that a perception by me where it's like a fear initially, you know, where maybe everyone's kind of keeping to themselves, or they're on their computers, or they're quiet, or you open the door and it's that moment where everybody looks your way because somebody new walked in.
Yeah.
And I think there can sometimes be a bit of a snobbiness, or maybe not, you know, maybe it's a place where, you know, we walk in and I sometimes get the sense where I feel like I don't look right, or they seem like they're all in a club together. I'm somehow outside of the club. So I'm wondering, how much do you think that actually exists? I mean, there's obviously a few assholes here and there, no matter what, but we always kind of paint the picture that the cigar culture is like kumbaya and we all get along and we all just like love this product so much. And sometimes there's just guys in there that think it's cool and aren't very nice. So I don't know, what's your experience? You think it's mostly in my head, or do you think there is that exists out there?
No, that's a brilliant question. I think it's not just in your head. Although having said that, I think you're right to psychoanalyze. I think in everything we do, I think we should also think, you know what, why do I have these prejudices, you know? Are they fair prejudices, or are they just... Because what I've found by doing what I did, forcing myself into those places and into often conversations and events and things where I did feel distinctly uncomfortable, but I made myself go. And as you can imagine, more often than not, you find most people are very pleasant. It's actually a nice event. People talk to you, look after you, and you think, you know, why should I not go to these things? So there is an element of, you know, your own intolerances or your own prejudices. There's definitely an element of that. And I try and, you know, as you get older, you fight these things, don't you? And you realise that things that you learn from your family might not necessarily be true anymore, or whatever. Having said that, yes, it's definitely true some places. And it's interesting. I think you're right. The second you walk in, you know. You know by the way people look, by the way they talk, by the way they treat you. Some places are very, very good at being clubs, as you say. Like, this is Joe, he sits in this chair, you know. This is Bob, he sits over there, and this is his cigar. You can't have that. And that was wonderful if you're part of the club, but not very nice if you're not. And so that's, I think, something the cigar industry needs to be very careful about, is that whilst it's wonderful to have a group of locals, clubbable atmosphere and all the rest of it, it can be very intimidating, as you say, for people who want to come in, if only to buy a cigar, or they'd like to be part of the club, but they don't know how to go about that. I think in most places, you know, you generally get welcomed in if you're a decent person. You sit down, you talk sensibly and behave in a reasonable manner. I think you get on pretty well. But I do think it's a good point. I mean, there are a lot of places that don't really care about, you know, new customers, where they seem not to care about new customers, which is a bit odd. I mean, Lawrence, you would have a good perspective on that. I mean, your store is a great amalgamation of those things. It's a tiny little, you know, in Mount Street, tiny little cigar store. You've got these characters that are always dropping in and out. How would you say that it's important to not make new people unwelcome?
Well, I find that people's nervousness when walking in is probably them, and their fear is probably their biggest problem.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I have a slew of celebrities.
Yeah.
From people like Billy Connolly, Slash.
You've had everybody in, haven't you, over the year?
And they just sit down and they're talking. They have the most amazing conversations.
Yeah.
Boris Becker was, when he was in the UK and not away on holiday in the UK, he was in at least 2 or 3 times a week and would talk to anybody and everybody about everything. He seems an unapproachable guy in real life.
But he isn't.
He's not.
Yeah. Interesting.
You know, I have Bert Pierstrider, who was at the time head of VW, ex-chairman of Porsche, in having a conversation with out-of-work builder who came in and smoked cigars like they were long lost friends. As you know, one of my great customers is Danny the cab driver.
Yep.
All right. And he comes in, he's a very simple guy with very simple needs,
Very
and
simple.
have great conversation with millionaires and billionaires. So
Did you
I-
you said Slash the guitarist?
yeah.
Ah,
And he was sitting there with Steve Tyler, and Steve Tyler turned around, having smoked a beautiful cigar, and said, "Do you know, if I knew this shit was this good, I wouldn't have been injecting myself for 60 years with all that crap." So you get, one day we had a conversation where we had the US ambassador in, who was telling us that he was, Mr. Sussman was one by one destroying as many Cuban assets as he could. All right. And Steven Spielberg was in having a cigar, and the head of the drone campaign was in from the US Army. And we had a few people in from the Middle East, and they're all having a conversation as great friends. So, I've got to say that wherever I've gone around the world, all right, and walked into a cigar lounge, as long as you've got the confidence to break the ice, all right, once it's broken, you find that you've got such a level of camaraderie, all right, just by the virtue that you like cigars and the conversation about this one, that one, did you like that? Did you not? Too strong for me, not strong enough for me. I just think that, look, there are places that you're not welcome. They just don't want you to sit and smoke, all right? But in the mainstay of the industry, I think that everybody in it is great. They're good people.
Yeah.
Good industry. There's very, very few not good people in the industry.
well, that's a really good point too, because a few times I have gone in and people weren't interacting, it felt odd. And maybe it's easy to be on your phone and ignore the people around you, but there also is a thing, called social anxiety. And my girlfriend always reminds me of this because she has zero social anxiety. And sometimes it just takes the one person. And sometimes it's me. Like you said, you got to get brave, got to walk through the door, and then I'll start talking to people. And then it turns out we're all getting along and having a great time. So, I forget that sometimes people feel that way. And like you said, Nick, to get over, any bias I might have growing up, not so wealthy. My parents had this idea of like, it's us and them.
Yeah.
And they're on the hill and they're playing golf and taking advantage of us. And it's like, to get over these things.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, it's a really good and interesting point. And, I think Lawrence's point is that most cigar people are pretty good people. And if you have the confidence and, sometimes the bottle to go in there and start the conversation, as you say, you're absolutely right. Social anxiety is a very real thing. And, we're not all Lawrence Davises. We can't all walk into a room and hold court. But if you do go in and, chat to people, 99 times out of 100, you end up having a really great time. So, yeah, it's a good point, Brian. Thank you.
Yeah. And Reinhardt's is the most welcoming atmosphere of all.
Definitely.
One more quick thought on the social media thing. Maybe it's more of just an opinion than a question, but it's always fascinating to me. So I'm in your camp, just to be clear in the front before I make any controversial statements, but I'm not a fan of social media. I delete Facebook and then I bring it back again. Something ropes me back in, but I'm not a huge fan. It's not for me. And Reinhardt brings up the idea of longer, more journalistic, informational pieces and spreading education and this and that. But I think there is an element. Obviously, technology has its good and bad things. Like you said, people can order boxes online during pandemics and things. And social media, I think, in terms of language, there's a truth. I think it's an evolution, and it happens slowly over time. And it doesn't take technology for it to happen. Not any of us have the vocabulary, maybe, that a young person growing up in the 20s had, or the 50s. So language changes over time, no matter what, whether we wanted to. Everything gets shorter. We use shorter words to express what we mean. And now we have emojis. And so videos get smaller, and things that you read online get smaller and shorter. And it's still conveying some kind of a message. But it's not as much information as people like us would like. And so I think it's unstoppable, and it happens at different speeds. I think technology speeds it up, and we need always the people like us to advocate for the way things used to be, or hold on to certain traditions, and remembering to stretch our minds to read longer things, you know, and certain things don't die out, I think, that are longer. Books, you know, people go to Broadway, like, we still have that attention span. So those are all my rambling thoughts on that topic.
Yeah, no, I think it's.
Nick, can I just come in? I just want to make a comment about smaller things. You being one of the smaller things in the world.
Thank you.
And small is beautiful, but the trend in our industry is getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
When I first started smoking, a D4 with a 50 ring gauge was a monster.
That's true, yeah.
And today, you handed me last week an Asylum 70.
No, it was
Perdomo 70.
Yes, it was an Immenso from Perdomo.
Yeah. So not everything. So Brian, I hate to contradict you, but our cigars are getting getting bigger, but our words and videos are getting.
Yeah, it's true, and you're right. I think you're right about bringing the younger generation into the discussion, because, you know, let's face it, the world isn't for us; it's for them. You know, that's life. But you're absolutely right as well. I think it's our role and our duty to try and keep alive things that we think are genuinely worthwhile. And the whole point of evolution is the good stuff stays and the bad stuff goes. In nature, that seems to work, but we're not very good at it as human beings, are we? We tend to hang on to the crap stuff and let the good stuff go by the wayside. And, you know, people have said to me for years, you know, print's finished, magazines are finished, you know, that those days are long gone. I just don't believe that. You know, it might not be like it was when print was the only thing available, of course, but I still, you know, fervently believe what I said earlier, that, you know, knowledge is based on, you know, books, basically. And, you know, being able to dive into something, like you say, go to a play, go to watch a movie, you know, something that involves some commitment from you. And I think that's where young people struggle, because they're faced with never having to do that commitment. And you know, their only options are sound bites. And I think that's where, you know, us as parents and guardians, I guess, it's our duty to show them that, you know, there is great stuff out there. It just requires you to give it a little bit more patience, you know?
They seem to handle all-day concerts in the desert.
Yeah, they're on something though, aren't they?
Cheers, thanks.
Thank you, Brian.
Excellent thoughts, Brian. Many thanks for chiming in. Ray, you had your hand up so patiently and for such a long time.
Raymondo.
Mr. Hammond.
How are you, buddy?
Long time no see.
Good to see you.
First of all, good luck with the book.
Thank you,
Can't wait on that one. You know how much I like the first one, so hopefully the second one will be better. My question is a little bit different from the tone tonight. Not long ago, I met a guy in Nicaragua. He told me you were working on something different. Can you share a little bit more on that?
What was the guy?
The guy looks like you with the more hair.
What, do you mean, you don't mean a Scottish guy, do you?
No, it was you wearing Perdomo shirt.
Oh, well, it was a guy who looks like me and a tan.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And I don't think I'm telling any secrets, Raymond, if I tell you that, yeah, I am currently in the process of writing Nick Perdomo's book, which was one of the reasons I was out spending so much time with him. And I know in America, Perdomo is a big deal, and you guys really, really dig his stuff. Over here, we don't know him so well. And he's only recently, his cigars have been over here through Tour Imports and Scott Vines and his crew. And I was with Ray over in Esterly, and we had, well, you had a day, I had several days of getting abused by Mr. Perdomo. He's not a man who's backward at going forward, if you know what I mean. But what a remarkable, remarkable story and a remarkable business. And you know, I don't know if you felt the same, Ray, but once you've been around those farms and just spent a day in his company, in the detail and the passion he has, it sounds very cliche because we say these things about everybody, but trust me when I say, you know, it's different. The Perdomo way really is different to the rest of the industry. You know, they have a saying, they like to say, when the industry zigs, we zag. And it's a great tagline, but they do live by that. You know, they live by their own rules. And so it's a brilliant story. And he is literally living the American dream and the cigar dream, you know, that we all think and talk about, that doesn't really happen anymore with all the big brands buying everybody. That's another great topic for conversation. But he literally was an air traffic controller in Miami, had a great job. He's a very clever man. He thinks very differently to everybody else I've ever met, and his brain just works differently. So he could handle these ridiculous shifts at Miami Airport when everyone else was toppling over and they couldn't do it. He'd do back-to-back shifts and have all, you know, life and death decisions every minute of every day. But his family his father came from a cigar background. You know, they were a Cuban family. And he decided that's what he wanted to be involved in. So he packed in his job as an air traffic controller to launch his Nick Sticks, as it first was, cigar company. And Janine, and she was packaging and, you know, packing them up in the lounge, and they were selling them out of his garage. And then now he's the 4th biggest cigar seller in America, and therefore in the world probably. So it is a massive business, and incredible to be able to go under the surface and find out more about that. So yeah, I'm working with Nick it's a sort of it's a semi-autobiography, I guess. You know, I'll have to tame his words down a little bit, because otherwise he'll upset everybody known to man. But it is a brilliant story. He's a very kind, generous man, and he's very loved by his family and his workers and people who know him best of all. And it's a superb story. So yeah, we're working on that. It's going to be part story of Perdomo Cigars and parts Nick Perdomo's story. I haven't got a definite release time for that, but we're hoping to have that something out maybe next year on that, Ray. And it will be a super book. I mean, and again, what I'm very proud to say is it's going to be really different. It's not going to be like any other cigar book.
Nice. I'm looking forward to that one.
Exciting.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
Nick,
Reinhard.
Mace, please.
Reinhard, I had just on that whole train of thought in terms of the book for Nick and what we were talking about earlier, changing the narrative and sort of flipping the script, as it were. Is that something that you're potentially, once you're done with Nick, going to explore more? Like, we know the Fuente books and the stuff that comes up, but is that another angle? Is that another way in there where these guys start talking about more about their histories and their lives, and you know, it becomes a new way of getting in there, as it were, legitimately, and not having to sort of secret stuff into the back door and magazines and stuff? Is that?
Yeah, that's the idea, Mace. That is the plan. We you know, it's sort of worked out that we can produce these beautiful books. You know, I can write them in such a way with a reasonable level of knowledge that makes, you know, it's not just a book by some guy who's trying to write about cigars. It's a guy who knows and loves cigars, writing about people involved. And hopefully, yeah, it's the start of a really interesting chapter where I can, you know, these guys can see the value of having a book that tells their brand story forever and ever. They can have it in their stores. They can give it to their clients. They can give it to cigar stores as an extra gift that they can put in their lounge for customers to read. It adds to the experience. It adds to the education. It tells you about the people behind what they're smoking, why they, you know, maybe that particular stick, how they came up with it, all of that stuff that we love. And it gives me a chance to carry on doing what I love, which is going around the world meeting these people. And hopefully on the back of that, there might be Around the World in 80 Cigars, volume 362. You never know. But yeah, that's the idea, Mace. That really is, that's the dream, to be honest. Get these guys to get involved.
Maybe this is an idea how to actually educate the people in some way. Just write the books for every company.
Yeah.
You made one already. Now it's the second one. So maybe carry on same way and create 50 books in the next 3 years.
Yeah.
And you can educate a lot of people.
Yeah, that's the plan. I mean, and if I can get it right, then that is commercially viable as well, Ray, because you know it's a long piece of work. It's a big piece of work. You need and are able to charge good money for it, and it really fulfills something from every angle of what the owner is trying to achieve, from promoting their cigars and their brand. It's an ego trip if that's what they want. I've got a book out. It's about me. But hopefully what I can bring is to, do more than that and create something that is genuinely interesting. And I mean, from this perspective, if you know nothing about cigars, don't like cigars, but you're an entrepreneur or a businessman, you definitely want to read it, because he's shown you how to build a several $100 million business from scratch. So it's quite exciting in that regard. And yeah, you're absolutely right. You guys picked it out. That's my plan if I can make it work.
Well, if it's good enough as if it's even good as the Joya de Nicaragua one, the Cinco de Cales, I mean, if you guys haven't read about, you don't know about this book, you need to try to find it. I know it's not easy at the moment because it's sold out a long time ago.
Yeah.
But this is a unique piece. I mean, it's one of the best cigar books you can read made in the last 5 years, Nick? 6 years? When did you make that one?
So it was for their 50th anniversary, which was
2018.
5 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, 5 years
so
ago.
It was published 5 years ago, and we were working on it a couple of years before that. So yeah, for those who don't know, I wrote the book for Joya de Nicaragua's 50th anniversary, and when they launched the Cinco Décadas range, they also launched a book in very limited numbers called Cinco Décadas: The Rise of the Nicaraguan Cigar, and that was my first eye-opening moment, really, of realizing what could come further down the line. And I mean, that's a coffee table book. I'm thinking Nick's book is more a book, but it's still going to be very cool. But yeah, it's a beautiful big coffee table book, and it's absolutely superbly put together. The quality of the paper, some of the print, they even have a leaf in there, don't they? On one of the pages, you can touch the veins on the leaf. It is really beautiful. And then I was lucky enough to be taken on by Joya, and I went out there, spent some time with them, traveling the country. I interviewed historians and poets and politicians. And what was really lovely about that project was the guys, the Martinez family, rather than saying we want a book about us, they very clearly said to me at the beginning, we don't want it to be about us. We want it to be about the workers, because we have people here that have been here 60 years through literally earth, wind and fire. And the revolution, dead bodies in the streets, the building being set on fire, people being shot and executed upstairs. All of those stories, some of these people were here for that. So I went around and interviewed all these really senior people rather, about their love for the brand and their love for the history and their love for cigars. And it was just a fantastic, fantastic privilege to be involved in it. And that did make me think there is a different way to tell these stories. And yeah, I mean, it's very hard to find now. I was thinking, I don't think I got one in the office, but it's a big, beautiful coffee table book. If you ever see it anywhere with a chance to buy it, snap it up, because all the ones are in private hands and there's no more out there at the moment.
Well, you've got a built-in audience with that kind of thing too, the people that are fans of the brand already. Yeah,
and that's the beauty of it, And also, I know people can be very brand loyal, but I think on the whole, if I said to you, you're a Padron guy, I said, look, have a look at this. This is a fantastic book. It's about, I don't know, Fuente. And you go, yeah, I'd like to read that. I love cigars. You're not just not going to read it because you like one type of cigar. So if you like cigars, I think you're genuinely interested in all those people. And what's been very interesting for me is seeing how, from the first book, I went round at the trade shows saying, guys, sit down with head of XYZ cigar company. You can give me 10 minutes of your time. Remember me, I'm this little guy from England. I write for Cigar Journal. I do all this stuff. I've got this good idea. I want to write a cigar book. And you're back to the square one where everyone goes, oh God, here we go again. No. This one's different. Listen, what I want to do is this. And they sort of go, sounds great, Nick, but no thanks. We've got other fish to fry. Second time round, it's a different story, which is really gratifying, because I'm getting people going, that's really cool. How would you like to come and see us? Or, when I approach them this time round, they actually give me half an hour and sit down and listen. So I'm hoping by the time we, get a few more volumes under my belt, that they'll be ringing me up saying, Nick, when can I star in your next book? But so you do have to sort of, take things in a new direction, don't you? And then lead for people to follow, I suppose.
Nick, I have a more generic question about the way you write those books, in particular when you work for a certain company or you're writing about a certain individual. You have to tailor, you have to tweak and truly come up with the right wording to capture the essence of that particular person or company.
Yeah,
which I know for a fact is a very challenging thing. How much do you think writing and capturing the essence of cigars and companies is a form of art, and how much of it is truly craftsmanship and skills that you can learn and acquire over the years with experience?
Blimey, that's really interesting. Yeah, it is very difficult, especially to do something good. What I would say was good, and by that I mean not just it reads like a very long advert. Do you know what I mean? This is traditional company and his dad and this guy, and they make great cigars. I mean, that's so easy and formulaic. You have to sort of fall into, it's very easy to fall into that trap, and I have to actively stop myself doing it all the time because it flows so easy, and it's simple, and there's information there, and you can write their history, and then his grandfather came from Cuba in 1960, and next thing you know, you're just doing the same stuff again. So yes, and I've had to learn a new skill in that, that style of writing as if from one person's perspective. So you're talking for them, it is ghostwriting. And that is very, very different to anything I've done before. So that makes it super interesting and quite tricky. But I think, we'll see, but I think I've got that. I think I'm quite good at, working out what makes people tick. And that's why I said, in Nick's case, we were going to spend a bit of time together. I was going to tie up with the guys on the tour there. And I said to him, look, in all seriousness, I don't mean this to be funny, but I need to spend a significant amount of time with you, away from you answering phone calls and dealing with everyday business and doing what I need to know, why you've done what you've done, how you've done what you've done. And more than that, I need to understand you, and I need to talk to your family. I need to interview your wife. I want to meet your children, and for some people that would just be far too much, and they go, no. But he's a super open guy, and he realised, for me to be able to speak in his voice, which is part of the book. I think a part of the book will be me telling you his story in his words, and part of the book will be interviews and other bits and bobs and significant moments in the company. So effectively, it's me telling you his story, but it sounds like it's him talking to you. So you have to become a mimic. You have to become an impersonator, impressionist. And you have to do that in a way that brings out the best side of them, of course, and not the worst, because they're not going to be happy if you make them look or feel stupid. And then there are also challenges with that in that, you want to also be honest and truthful. And when you meet the guy at a trade show, you want to still be able to recognise him as the same guy that you read in the book. I think that's very important. Yeah, and it's important to me, in integrity-wise, that I project a true portrait as well as a good one, even if they're paying for the book or whatever. So that's a real new skill to learn. This is to do that, to get inside somebody's mind, and that's a whole new ballgame entirely, But it gives you such a depth of information and such a depth of, a depth of description about things and people and places and attitudes and why things happened, and serendipity and timing and luck and all the things that go into making, a great life and a great business. And the key moments that you can hone in on and say, when you did that at that time, when you spoke to that person and you made that decision, which at the time looked like madness, why did you do that when everyone else was going to do this? And I think that's what makes, for me, endlessly fascinating, the cigar journey, is that all those people have such a story to tell, but nobody ever gets that deep. So to be able to deep dive like that is just a joy to me. And I hope that, this new way of writing, proper books, not just glossy books with pictures in them, but proper, long form, informative and amusing and entertaining writing is really what I think I see for me as the future of cigar writing.
I couldn't agree more, Nick, and to like deep dive on that a little more and share some exciting news. I mean, Reinhold, who was joining us on Facebook a bit earlier, he just commented that he treasures you as such a valued contributor to the Cigar Journal magazine,
Yes.
and that Cigar Journal will give away a 1-year free subscription to the digital version of the magazine to
Yep.
each and every backer of your crowdfunding campaign. And I hope that's another little incentive for all the people to back you and support and chime in and get the book off the ground flying.
Yeah, absolutely. And Reinhold's just one of the great guys in the business, isn't he?
Very much so.
He's so supportive, and I think we'd all say the same thing. We're not just saying that because we write for him. He's a lovely man. He's a kind, gentle, thoughtful guy. And I said, look, can I do something with the magazine? Can I maybe place an advert? And Reinhold just comes back and says, we're here at your disposal. What do you want to do? We're happy to do anything. Can we offer something for the crowdfunding? So everybody who backs the book as an added bonus extra, no extra cost, is going to get a 12-month subscription to Cigar Journal Digital, which, is just that little extra bit of magic which helps these things. People go, do you know what? I'm getting this great book and I'm getting this. Bother, they're going to give some great swag away. It's a win-win situation. And that, as all business owners know, if you can get to a win-win situation, then you're going to do okay. So, yeah, he's a great, great guy. Who is it that's somebody saying thank you for me for giving them some book advice? I'm sorry, it only comes up as a number, so your name's not on there. But I must have spoke with you at some time about writing and stuff, and I'm very glad that it was helpful if it was. So thank you for those kind words.
Plenty of kind words for you, Nick, in the comments, both here and over on Facebook on the live stream. So I can only wish you the very, very best for the campaign and for the sequel of Around the World in 80 Cigars, there and back again. Before we wrap things up, I'm curious if you could wish for this new book coming out and probably your writing in general to have a certain lasting impact on the industry and the people reading those books, what would you wish for that to be?
Wow. Well, that's a great question. And that makes me think one thing that I haven't mentioned and I should have done, and which is very important to me, is giving something back. And for the first book, we decided to donate some of the proceeds of the book. Reese. Thank you, Reese. It was Reese who was commenting on the book. Yeah, thank you, Reese, my friend. You're a good lad. One of the things we decided to do was give proceeds from the book to the Faith and Happiness School in Esteli. And I just strongly feel that if you want to put something out in the world and expect to get something back, you should be willing to give back as well. And not just from a purely transactional point of view. It just feels like that's the way human beings should go about their business to me, in a good world. So I wanted to do some good as well as, get the book out there and maybe make some money. So I donated a percentage of money from every book sold. We held some events around the UK. Tour imports were very good. He helped me distribute in the UK. Scott Vines, he donated £1 from every book distributed. Several of the retailers got involved, helped raise money in different events all over the country. And cut a long story short, when Ray was in the country recently with the tour, they visited the school that I first went to visit with Scott in 2017, and we had the idea to try and help these kids who, really do have very, very little. They have a nice school by Nicaraguan standards. They were proud as punch of their little playground. And then if it had been in the UK, it would have been condemned and locked up. You know, it was falling to bits. There was nothing there that was working. And the problem that they have there is that the children have to pack up school so young because they need to go and work to support the family. So by the age of about 12, these kids, you know, start working half a day with their mum and dad in the fields or clearing rubbish or doing menial jobs to earn some money. And of course, you know, they then never get that chance to educate themselves to a level where they can step out of that and hopefully have a better life. And it's particularly bad for girls, as you can imagine. They end up getting pregnant very, very young. They have their families very, very young. And things don't work out very well for them, and they don't have great lives in a lot of. So the secret is to try and keep them in education as long as possible. Effectively, that's the golden bullet. For every year you can keep these kids in education, you can dramatically see their life chances and even their lifespan improve. So we raised this money, and Scott went over there recently and told the sister who the nun who heads the school that we've got this money. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there. I was with Nick Perdomo, but they handed over a check for nearly $10,000. And it's not a massive amount of money, but it goes an awful, awful long way out there. It really does. I mean, that buys a lot of uniforms, food, whatever they want to turn it to. So I was very, very proud of that. And so I wanted to do something similar. In the next book, we are going to be helping again. There's another project that I saw when I was out there this time, working with a friend and the company at Lever. They support this charity near Lyon. And it's in one of the slum areas of Lyon, which I went and visited and met the kids and the families, spent some time with them. And it's probably the poorest area of Nicaragua. You know, they don't have any running water, electricity, flushing toilets. And this Belgian guy called Philippe Vertrieste has built a little learning centre right in this slum. And they've, you know, personally dug the gardens, they've planted vegetables, they've planted flowers, they've built this little school, for want of a better description, with classrooms, and everything is paid for. The pupils have to apply to join the school. They have to commit to attending. So yes, you can come here and learn and live a better life, but you've got to come to school. You can't come one day and then not come the next. They have to commit to certain levels of behaviour. And there are full scholarships available for these children for not a busting lot of money. It's like $150 a month. We'll put these kids through school. It will give them a uniform. It will give them everything they need. It will feed them at least one nutritious meal. So the new book is going to hopefully, through the crowdfunding and your support, also fund some full scholarships for some of these young kids to hopefully have a better start in life. So that's very important to me.
Lovely. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, sorry I didn't say that earlier. I just forgot. But what was the final bit of your question, Reinhard?
Well, in essence, what you would like your writing,
yes, to be remembered, yeah.
Well, not only to be remembered for, but what would you like your writing to do to other people when they read it, when they perceive it? What would you like them to feel, and thus kind of take it further and make a lasting impact?
I think the thing more than anything that I wanted to get across was that the joy that Cigars has brought me, and the fulfillment and the friendships. I mean, you were talking earlier about learning about topography and terroir, and I've learned more about the world and countries and geography and people and cultures and religions through cigars than I ever did in any classroom. I honestly have. You know, I've gone around the world and visited these places and gone to see, you know, things like the Great Lakes that we used to talk about in a boring geography lesson, and I was right there, you know, and then the native Indians and going on a reservation and seeing how people live in different parts of the world and the things they have to put up with and the different cultures. So for me, I really wanted to take people with me on that journey and see, the wonder of the world. You know, I know we live in difficult times, and if you pick up a paper or read or watch the news, you can be forgiven to thinking that you know, it's apocalyptic out there and the world's going to end and everyone's hating each other. And of course, there is some of that. But, you know, I can honestly say in all my years of traveling the world, the amount of really bad things that have happened, I could count on one hand. And, you know, all I've gone out there with is a sort of open heart and an open mind. And I've found a reciprocal thing with people. I meet amazing people who, you know, are good people and want the world to be a better place and want a better place for their kids to live in. And I think that's a very human condition. You know, we want our kids to have a best life possible. That is what is hardwired into us. That's the whole purpose of having children, isn't it? And you want to be part of a community, you know, people who care for each other and look out for each other and know the difference between right and wrong. And I think, you know, what I really love is that people get to travel with me, see these different places, maybe learn things they didn't know, and meet people, wonderful people doing amazing things. And the planet is an incredible, you know, place. The world we live in is a beautiful, amazing place. And I'm just so proud and privileged to be able to travel it and then get people to live vicariously through what I write.
I couldn't think of a better and more wonderful way to conclude the session, Nick. And I couldn't agree more with everything you said. It's beautiful and a testament to the gentleman you are, the amazing soul you are, and I feel privileged and I'm delighted to call you a fellow and friend along the cigar journey. And you know that we all support what you do and we all appreciate what you do because it is much needed, and it's certainly a contribution to make the world a better place, as you just said. And so thank you very much for all you do. Keep up the amazing work, and I wish, and I can only say it again, that everybody joining us watching will get behind the campaign, support you, get the book off the ground flying, and hopefully in a year from now or in 2 years from now, we'll sit here and talk about the third chapter and many other exciting projects, and we'll look back on a very, very successful campaign for this one here. And I can't wait to read some more of those fabulous stories.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you, Reinhard. It's always a privilege to come and chat to you. And I know you appreciate everything that the cigar world does, and you always manage to get it across in a very kind way. And so thank you personally to you, and thank you to everybody who's watched here tonight and taken the time out of their busy lives to come and listen to me rambling on. A long ashes to you all. A real pleasure to meet you. If I can help you in any way or answer any questions or send you a book, feel free to contact me any way you can. It's been a pleasure.
Many thanks. Nick Hammond, thank you so much for joining the Light 'em Up Lounge. See you soon, my friend. All the very best. And Friday is a big day, the launch and the start of the campaign for There and Back Again, the sequel to Around the World in 80 Cigars. So chime in, share your love, share some support, and Nick, all the best to you. Light 'em up, everybody, and we'll see each other again soon. Goodbye and good night for today.